Everyone. My name is Rory Smith, and I'm the research manager at First Draft. And today I'm kind of going to run you guys through some of the monitoring stuff that we use, or some of the kind of the methods that we use to monitor Facebook and various other platforms. You guys might be familiar with CrowdTangle. This isn't going to be a presentation about CrowdTangle, but other ways of doing monitoring, excluding CrowdTangle. So we're going to cover kind of Facebook groups and pages. We're then going to dive into kind of the Facebook ads library, and I'm going to show you guys all about the CrowdTangle plugin, which is actually free, and you guys can kind of add that. It's an extension that you can add to your browser. So Shay, I'm not sure if you want to add anything else before I just kind of open and share my slide deck. Cool. Let me just find it here. All right, there we go. Cool, can everyone see this? We good? All right. So that's a really horrible picture of me. I've been meaning to change that for a long time, but that is me. And like I said, I am the research manager at First Draft. So first, we're going to dive into Facebook pages and groups and how we can find them, how we source them, and then how we can monitor them without using CrowdTangle. So first off, and this is, I think self-explanatory in some sense, and I'll actually just kind of the easiest way. Facebook does offer a pretty comprehensive search function, right? So by just going into Facebook and searching whatever field that you're interested in, whatever beat you're reporting on, it will surface large amounts of information based off of that. And what's really nice is that it offers numerous different filters to kind of hone in on the specific types of information you guys are looking for. So as you can see on the left-hand side there are multiple filters where you can, pick an actual location, a city, for example. So if you're reporting on the protest in Milwaukee or any of the protests in any city, you can kind of pick a specific city and then find groups, pages, posts that are emanating from that particular region. You can also set, look for posts within certain date ranges as well. And if you look at the top of the screen too, it gives you myriad other options as well. So, for example, I was just looking at groups related to kind of George Floyd. And if you just search for George Floyd in the search bar and then click on groups, you can find numerous types of groups with that name, right? So again, if you're monitoring specific protest groups or just monitoring any political groups, this is a nice way of surfacing them, and then you of course can join them to continue your monitoring to make sure that you're getting these posts on a daily basis. If you are going to do it this way, I highly recommend that you have a different Facebook account outside of your own, just so your personal account doesn't get flooded with all this monitoring information that you'll be doing, right? So it's always nice to have a separate account outside of your personal one, and that also has to do with security as well, just to ensure that you are secure when you're doing this type of monitoring. And then, and I think this is kind of an unappreciated way of surfacing stuff. So Facebook obviously has its search algorithm, which I just showed you through its search function, but it might miss groups. And what's great about Google is that you can use Google advanced searches. So combinations of either facebook.com/groups or facebook.com/pages in quotation marks, and then a specific chain of keywords or phrases, which you can make as advanced as possible. So you can do Trump or Biden or Clinton, etc., to surface numerous different pages and groups that you might be interested in as well. So oftentimes stuff that doesn't appear immediately through Facebook search, you can surface using Google advanced searches as well. And that goes for Instagram as well, for Reddit, for any of the social media platforms that you might be looking for. This is a really nice way of searching for specific accounts or accounts with those names in them across different kind of social media platforms. So first off, I just want to, are there any questions right now? I'm going to kind of, I feel like I always fly through this stuff. So I'm going to open it up for any particular questions, whether it regards kind of the search function in Facebook or Google advanced searches. Anyone confused or have any questions at this point? All right, cool. If so, just chime in at any time, by the way, even if it's like interrupting me, I don't care. It's more important that you guys are getting information and that it's conveyed to you. You kind of can, yeah, you guys take it all on board. So when you are investigating a specific page or group, it's always nice to look at not only the URL or the name in the URL, but also the kind of names that appear as well. Oftentimes what we see is the URL name might be different from the name in the page, and that suggests that it might have been a different page, which was then kind of like hijacked and then turned into something else. So often a really easy strategy to implement to grow a user base, especially if you're a group, is to have a page, right? Where you essentially buy Facebook ads outside of political ads. And it could be around, you know, cats or guns or anything that's completely random. And what you do is you build up a large audience until you hit a certain threshold, whatever threshold you're happy with, whether it's like 50,000 followers or 100,000 followers. And then you flip your page completely. So you make it political all of a sudden. So you go from cats to politics, and you start bombarding that page with, you know, hyperpartisan memes and messaging. And it's a really kind of expedient way of reaching a lot of people quickly with very minimum kind of monetary or just minimum investment financially, because Facebook ads are very cheap and they reach large amounts of people in a short amount of time. So always be on the lookout for, you know, if the URL, the name of the URL is different from the actual page. And I'll show you some other ways of actually finding, you know, whether a page has changed its name over time as well. So also, when you're investigating groups, this isn't available for pages, unfortunately. Necessarily, not all of them. The ones that are running ads, it is, but not the ones that aren't. But for groups, you can actually go in and investigate who the admins are or the moderators. And so when I was working in the UK during the last election back in November, we identified, you know, various hyper-partisan groups that we then went into, looked up the admins, and a lot of them were kind of sitting politicians that were you know, administrating some of these groups, right? So it's a nice way of kind of fingerprinting who's behind a lot of hyper-partisan content, and it's always a great story if these groups are pushing out mis or disinformation. Because if they're linked to actually like sitting politicians, that's a story that we should all run with, right? So this is a nice way of kind of investigating who's behind these admins. And then once you have a list of names, which I recommend kind of inserting into a spreadsheet, you can kind of build out a network of sorts to see if there are any links across suspicious groups. And so again, like I said before, you can't do the same thing with pages. You have to take an alternate route. Sorry, I'll go back. So for here, or for pages, we have the page transparency tool, which you can see on the kind of the right side of a Facebook page. And by clicking on that, You see when the page was created, and if the page has changed names, like I said before. So recently created pages with many likes and followers could indicate that the page paid for likes and followers to bolster its credibility. It also shows kind of the number of people who manage the page and where they are located by country. And this is a really interesting one, because if you have accounts that are spamming kind of hyper-partisan misinformation or just hyper-partisan content, but the admins are located outside of the US, this is kind of a red flag of sorts, that there might be some very suspicious or inauthentic activity going on. And it's not proof of that, but it's a good lead to further investigate. And this is a definite story if these pages are actually running US political ads, right? So if you have admins that are outside of the US and they're running US political ads, that is very much a story of sorts, because that shouldn't be happening according to Facebook's policies. And you can also see whether the page is like brought on other pages. And you can also click on the ad section, which will then redirect you to the ad library, which will show all of the ads that are currently being run or have been run in the past by that specific page. And we'll get into the ads part in more depth in a little bit. So this is kind of what the panel looks like. Once you click on the page transparency tool, you get kind of the summary, which shows you kind of, here we go on the right side, the people that manage the page. They're both in the US. You can see whether it's changed its name. In this case, it hasn't. You get the page creation date, which is November 15th. And you get the fact that this page isn't running any ads currently, right? And you can also get more granular data on each of those by clicking on the page history tab, the people who manage this page at the top, and the organizations that manage this page. What's interesting is that any page that is running ads has to declare the person that owns the page, right? So again, if a page is running ads and that information isn't there, again, that is a potential story lead for you, as that currently violates Facebook's policies. And stories that hold these platforms to account are always good. So if you're seeing like multiple pages or tens of 20, 30, hundreds of pages that aren't showing the confirmed page owner but are running ads, then you definitely have a very good story, I would say. Because again, Facebook has promised that they would do this. They promised this back in kind of February. And if they still aren't implementing these measures, then definitely a good story lead. So quickly, again, I'm going to open it for questions regarding kind of, the page transparency section or anything I've covered. How is everyone doing right now? Are we okay with what I've presented so far? Cool. Awesome. I will continue ahead then. So for groups, if you click on the About section within a group, you also get kind of that granular data on whether a page has changed its name, or not, sorry, whether a group has changed its name and when that group was created. Unfortunately, while pages are kind of geotagged in terms of who's administrating the page, groups are only geotagged if those group admins or moderators elect to do so. So this data isn't necessarily available for every group, but a wide array of groups do host this data. And it's also kind of important if you're trying to uncover kind of networks within your region, or at least within your country. It's a good option to look into, and that's available in the discussion tab, which is kind of within in the description box. So as a word of warning, again, it shows by country, but it doesn't necessarily show what particular region it's based. And of course, you can kind of set that randomly also. So you can't necessarily use that to show any type of kind of foreign interference, or anything like that. However, again, it is a good red flag, and it's a red flag that can kind of inspire further investigation.
Hey, Rory, I have a question.
Who is this?
This is Francesca.
Hey, Francesca.
So is it pretty easy for a Facebook user to use a VPN and flag their location in a place they're not actually located in? So for example, if somebody had this in mind and they were located in Russia, could they turn on a VPN and pretend they're located in the United States and their account is located in the United States? Or is Facebook sort of smart enough to get around that?
Yeah, my understanding is Facebook, because of what happened, what transpired in the last election, they've kind of upped their strategies, or their just general kind of security protocols to address that type of kind of geo hiding. So I think they generally monitor, and again, they talk about privacy all the time, but I think they actually monitor the IP address that it was registered on. So again, if you're using a VPN, you generally, the next time you use it, it switches IPs. So if that does happen, then they will flag that as suspicious activity internally. So again, I guess to answer your question more briefly, no, it's more difficult to do that. However, saying that, I would actually encourage that as a possible investigation, just to see how serious Facebook has gotten on this. So, I mean, it's almost worth starting your own page using a kind of a thorough VPN, and seeing how far you can get in terms of getting around that. But yeah, no, my understanding is that they've clamped down significantly since 2016, and specifically in that respect.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Any other questions? Cool. I will continue. Great question, by the way. So in the About tab also is really useful. And again, we're just using right now what's inside Facebook itself, but you can find a wide array of interesting and relevant information that might lead you down a significant kind of investigative track. So oftentimes web pages or groups within their kind of About section have a telephone number, or at the very least a website, right? And if it is a suspicious page or group and they have a website, that is oftentimes worth investigating. So especially digitally, like fingerprinting that website and tracking down its IP address, as well as kind of some of the Google and Facebook ad trackers that are connected to that website, to see if it's involved, or is part of another network. And again, there are many tools you can use to do that type of digital fingerprinting. And it's also worth running it through the CrowdTangle link checker as well, which I'll show you in a second, to see what other pages and groups that website is appearing on, to kind of further map potential network spreading just shoddy content, hyperpartisan content, or misinformation. So cool. Yeah, obviously Facebook has changed its layout. Some people have the new one. Some people still don't. I'm still operating with the old one for some reason, which is fine by me, because I don't particularly like the new interface. And I've been using this one for a long time. But within the old interface, at least, you can search for posts, and specifically keywords within posts, by clicking on the post section. And if you click on the post section, that search for post on this page, search bar will appear. And then instead of having to scroll through an entire Facebook page feed, you can surface particular posts based off of your keywords. And then there's also the community function. And by clicking on the community function, you will get kind of recommendations to other pages that are similar to that particular Facebook page as well. And I'm not sure if it's the same on the new interface, but on the old one, yeah, it would kind of surface groups and pages that were sharing similar content. On the new interface, you have this, which is kind of at the top of the Facebook page, and it's actually in the home settings. So if you click on that search icon, then you get a little drop down, and the same thing. Essentially, you input your keywords, and you will surface those posts that have an instance of those particular keywords. And back to the community tab. Yeah, so it'll often show you, the not only kind of the different kind of groups and pages that have shared content from that specific page, but it'll show also kind of posts from other individuals as well, which is useful as well to see who's kind of spreading this type of content. So again, because we're all about digitally fingerprinting to compile as much evidence as possible around suspicious pages and groups, the Files tab within groups I find particularly useful. And it's been very useful throughout the kind of reopen protests. It was useful back in the UK election, and it's generally just useful all the time, but specifically now, I think, just because the US is entering, there's just been a massive surge of groups, especially protest groups, that are kind of like newly created. So what the Files tab shows you are effectively any kind of PDFs or official documentation that relate to that group. So for example, in this instance, we have the Reopen California Now group, which is public. This information is also accessible within private groups, but obviously you have to join those private groups. But it will give you any kind of PDFs published, and oftentimes within these PDFs are the names of some of the key players within these groups, as well as other kind of institutional information about what other entities are involved. The locations of some of these protests, many myriad pieces of information that you can then use to kind of fingerprint who's behind this, and whether there are actually possible connections with outside organizations. So during the Reopen America protests, it was found out that there was some kind of high-level people involved in orchestrating a lot of them, kind of inorganically rather than organically. So this is the type of information you might be able to surface through PDFs within the Files section. Cool. Any questions, input, experiences you guys might have that you want to kind of chime in right now is a good time before we head into the next section. Any other questions?
Hi, I have a question. So surrounding, I guess, journalism ethics, is it okay to create like a fake account to join perhaps like a community that you wouldn't normally be a part of, just to kind of figure out what's going on in there? Or should you just do it with your actual profile?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of an ongoing discussion at First Draft, just because these guidelines haven't really been institutionalized in any respect, and I think they vary by newsroom. So it's really kind of contingent on the entity that you're working for. Obviously, First Draft, we have certain guidelines, but they fluctuate in a sense. But I think our take right now, and Shay, feel free to chime in too about this, is that we, some of us that are essentially entering these private groups have what we call burner accounts. So they don't necessarily have our name. It might be kind of generic information, or we might be posing as kind of an elder citizen. But we don't contribute, we don't post within these groups. We're literally there just to watch the conversation. And for me, if you know, if there are kind of admin questions that you have to answer to be accepted to these groups, I'm generally as honest as possible. And what I mean by honest, it's my answers are quite ambiguous, but they're never lies. So it's like, why do you want to join this like heavily right-wing group? I always say I'm interested in politics. So just kind of bland answers. But yeah, to kind of answer that question, again, it's contingent on the organization. But yeah, I would recommend for just your own personal security to have burner accounts. But if people do interact with you, to be kind of straightforward and honest, because that's when journalists get in trouble, is when they're kind of misleading people that they're monitoring, or they get actively involved in the conversation. And for me, that does violate some ethical principles.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense to be safe. It's kind of like a spy, but like more appropriate.
Yeah. And Shay, if you wanna chime in.
Yeah, I would just add that we do a lot of monitoring of, the conversation online, because we're trying to help journalists who are not doing that kind of reporting to understand like what people are talking about. Like, this is such a big way people are politically engaged right now. But a lot of us don't really like the concept of monitoring groups continuously, and we really don't, we really take seriously the idea of not like unnecessarily prying into people's personal lives or groups where they, like where they feel safe. One thing to think about is that like even groups that are public, like open to anyone to join, depending on the platform, and especially on Facebook, there can still be an expectation of privacy. So that applies to certain kinds of private Facebook groups that anyone can join, but are still, isolated to a particular community. It can also apply to Telegram groups. We haven't talked about that in any of these trainings, but there are lots of Telegram groups that are open to the public that anyone can join. But because those are closed messaging spaces, like you have to think about that expectation of privacy. For example, during the general strike day, there was like this like narrative that people were talking about a whole bunch about like this isn't genuine organizing. Like, it's not actually workers who are doing some of these strikes. And so one or two of us ended up joining a Telegram group that was for like people who work at Whole Foods, and anyone can join it. But like that was a group that was like specifically for that community, even though it was public, right? And I think the person confirmed, okay, yeah, like these people are definitely organizing, but then they left because it doesn't really do anyone good to like be lurking. Like, we don't like to be lurking. And then the same thing also goes for like personal safety. Like, if you are monitoring a group that's like white supremacists or whatever it may be, you have to be careful about your safety, because often people know when there are lurkers and when there are journalists around, and that's not good for anyone. And often using, like, you have to be aware that if you try to sign into a community or a platform with a VPN, you will often be flagged. That's not just true on Facebook, it's also true on Discord. You can't create a burner account on Discord with a VPN, they will flag you. So you have to create those accounts and then log out and then log into a VPN. Like, all of these things are very complicated. So we definitely don't encourage unnecessary monitoring of people.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jed. Yeah, I'll just add on to that a bit when it comes to personal security, and the reason we do advocate for burner accounts, especially when one is monitoring extremist groups, is because they're incredibly paranoid, number one. And if you are using your personal account and you're found out, they are quite effective in terms of getting your personal information and doxing you, right? And that's absolutely not what we want to have to anyone, because it's just very dangerous when that happens. When your personal information gets made publicly available, that's when you're actually at risk of like physical harm. And then two, yeah, like Shay said, I actually be running a webinar next week in case you guys are interested around monitoring WhatsApp. I know it's not necessarily relevant to the US just because it's not used that much, but it is used in specific communities, especially like Latino communities in the US. And so a lot of WhatsApp groups are actually publicly available, and you can just surface those through advanced searches on kind of Facebook or Twitter. But again, yeah, there's a kind of expected level of privacy even with these public groups. So again, it's just, yeah, never kind of interact with anyone in there. You're there to lurk in a sense, like Shay said. But yeah, I would recommend, number one, having a good public interest argument before you do any of this. And number kind of three is that a lot of this stuff can be really just damaging to yourself. A lot of the content that these groups produce is poisonous. And if you're monitoring it all the time, it can have a real kind of inimical mental health effect. Like we call it vicarious trauma at First Draft. And it's when you are exposed to kind of unsettling footage or messaging all the time, one suffers kind of PTSD like symptoms, or actually rather they experience PTSD symptoms. So really we want to try to limit one's exposure to these private groups, especially ones that are very extreme in terms of the content that they're pushing out. But yeah, hopefully that all makes sense. But next up here, we have the CrowdTangle plugin. So the CrowdTangle plugin is free, and it is a browser extension that you can get, and I'm gonna urge you guys to get it in a second. But it is incredibly powerful, very useful. So any link that you have, essentially you navigate to that web page, and then as you see at the top, kind of on your kind of toolbar, you see the CT icon. That's the CrowdTangle icon. By pressing on that, it will give you this drop-down bar, which gives you a lot of very granular, interesting data, not only for Facebook, but for Twitter, for Reddit. So to show all the subreddits that particular URL has been shared on, all the Twitter users that have shared it in the last 7 days, and all the Instagram accounts where it's been shared as well. So we go to the next one. Here is kind of that data in kind of like a bigger format. What's also nice is that if you look right below where it says Facebook interactions, right? Those metrics, the first one is kind of all interactions aggregated. What's nice about that number is it's a total aggregation of not only public groups and pages, but also private groups and pages. And that's something you can't get within the CrowdTangle platform, right? And it won't show you necessarily the groups or the pages, the private ones I'm talking about, but it will aggregate those metrics for you. So obviously this URL here, which was published by law enforcement today, and suggests that, you know, Antifa was going to go into neighborhoods or more rural and residential kind of suburban neighborhoods to kind of wreak havoc. This was later debunked as I'm sure you guys saw that the Twitter account was run by a white supremacist group. But nonetheless, if you see what kind of spread that had, I mean, it received almost 600,000 interactions, not to mention almost 90,000 shares. That has serious traction, and that's why that messaging kind of went viral in a sense. So it's a really nice way of, you know, using a specific list of suspicious URLs to get metrics on the kind of interactions that they might have gotten, right? And this is really important because First Draft, we're always talking about the tipping point and when to report on a story or a kind of a misleading article. So if it's only gotten like, you know, 9 or 10 shares or 11 shares, it might be misleading and might be factually incorrect, but it's probably not worth reporting on, because essentially by reporting on it when it has that few interactions, you're giving it unnecessary oxygen. You're simply amplifying the false messaging, whereas it would probably kind of die and disappear on its own. But if you get a story like this with hundreds of thousands of interactions, which is also factually incorrect, then this is the time you want to probably produce some type of debunk or report on how this story is misleading. And it's also really helpful because, as you can see there, it shows every single Facebook, or I should say every single public Facebook page and public group that link has been shared on. So it's really nice in terms of like building up lists to monitor, lists of groups and pages to monitor, as well as to see whether you start seeing similar pages and groups that are spreading all these problematic URLs. Any questions about the plugin? Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys actually like 10 minutes. Shay, how are we doing on time?
We are good on time.
Cool, awesome. So I'm gonna give you guys 10 minutes to, first of all, go and get the CrowdTangle plugin extension. Again, it's free. You can easily add it to your dashboard, or not your dashboard, but your whatever browser you're using. I think it's easier on Chrome if you have Chrome. But yeah, get the extension right now. And then if you guys want to, or I kind of want you guys just like, if you have any problematic URLs that you've seen, or just any URLs in general, to just use this tool for the next kind of 10 minutes to find out information.
Maybe 5 minutes, Rory.
Okay, yeah, let's do 5 minutes. Just to get general, like an idea of how useful this is. And to see if you guys have any questions about how to use it, or what's being surfaced. I think the best way of getting to, or familiarizing yourself with something is by using it. So if you guys want to do that right now, go to Web Extensions and then get the CrowdTangle plugin, and then kind of start looking at specific URLs or links that you guys have. And then I'm here for any questions you guys might have as well.
Hi, Rory. Hi, Shakira. Is it just called CrowdTangle in the Chrome Web Store, or? Okay, sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Again, I muted myself. Yeah, it's just called CrowdTangle. And again, once you have it installed, it's as simple as just navigating to whatever website link URL that you're interested in, and then just clicking that extension, and these metrics will pop up.
It's asking me to log into my Facebook. That's normal. I'm on the right one, right?
Yes, that is normal. I think the first time, and it will do that every few days probably, but yeah, that's normal. So if you just use your Facebook login details, you should be able to access it.
I have to leave, but I appreciate you, Rory, for giving us this information. I will be
Rory, can I ask a question?
Please.
Okay, so I posted this in the chat too. Is there like a general recommendation for like computer security that you would recommend for journalists? I have like the free version of Avast, but it's not like fully comprehensive, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's a big question. There are many, I mean there are many ways of dealing with computer security. I think it's the most important part is like mapping out what are like your current vulnerabilities, right, and what you are looking to protect. But again, having something that manages all your passwords, and something that creates like very elaborate passwords for each one of, you know, anything you have to log into is number one, something that then protects those. I don't necessarily have anything that, you know, does that off the top of my head. I know there are tons of kind of different, well, there's lots of software that does that. Shay, I'm not sure if you have anything that you use that you might like.
There's LastPass. Have you, I mean,
yeah, that's right, Jacqueline, thank you.
The staff of First Draft is using LastPass for the most part. So that's what you can use it for two-factor authentication. So you can use that for Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and basically anything that you want. And that really heightens your security. So I would suggest most of you download that after this webinar.
Does it also hide your IP?
No, LastPass is just for kind of passwords. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking to hide your IP, it's recommended that you get a VPN. There are many services out there. First Draft, we use NordVPN. Mm-hmm. Of course, you can use Tor browser. Is also useful because it does, you know, if you're navigating within that, that hides your IP as well. But yeah, actually having a VPN on top of Tor is the best way of doing it if you are really worried about your IP getting tracked. So it's having a VPN like Nord and then using Tor, the Tor browser, on top of that.
Thank you.
So did you guys have the CrowdTangle plugin is working? Anyone find anything interesting? Nothing?
I found a page called Sheep No More. I just like did a search on Trump's most recent tweets about Mattis, and you know, it's a fun a group. There's a lot of Pepe the Frog memes.
Yes. With all of Trump's supporters, or I'm not all of them, that's a sweeping generalization, but a lot of the kind of QAnoners, that those types of communities, yeah, it's rife with kind of Pepe stuff. So yeah, how many interactions did you get off of that website?
I think, okay, so on Facebook it says 323, and then total interactions is 128, and then for like the group is a group of like over 10,000 people.
Okay, yeah, I mean, so the groups might be huge, but again, it's something that's worth taking into consideration. So those are quite small in terms of interactions. So if it is a story you're considering reporting on, you might want to monitor if like interactions grow over time. But at that point, it's like small enough where you probably wouldn't want to report on it necessarily. However, the drop down list of groups that are sharing it is very useful. And I should mention as well, so there's a download icon that you guys see at the top of the CrowdTangle plugin once you kind of click on it. And that's nice because it essentially downloads all that data in a CSV, which you can then add to Google Sheets. And it's a nice way of just kind of aggregating all these groups into one kind of database of sorts, if that makes sense. And if you are like, if you're comfortable using Excel and all this, it's also another way of kind of doing a bit more deep dive data analysis type of stuff. But I think it's time to move on, just for the sake of time. Any questions first, though, before moving on about the plugin? Nope. Everyone okay with it? Everyone got it working? I'll take silence as a yes. Okay, cool. So now we're moving on to the Facebook ad library. And this is data essentially on ads run on Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, and the audience network, which is a new part of, not a new part, but a part of, excuse me, Facebook. So you can get to the ad library by navigating to that link right there. So facebook.com/ads/library. And as you can see, you can find all ads running on Facebook, which will give you certain details, or you can search for issue, electoral, or political ads, which will give you much more granular details about kind of who's being targeted by the ads, for example, what states, what gender, as well as kind of spending and general impressions, so the amount of people that these ads reached, which isn't necessarily available for the all ads part, but I'll show you what data is available for the issue, electoral, and political ads. And you can also get there by, again, I mentioned before that there's the ad transparency part of Facebook pages, which you can, which is accessible, within a Facebook page. There's the icon, the political transparency part, which if you click on reveals this. And if you see at the bottom right, you see the ads from this page. This page is currently running ads. This page has run ads about social issues, elections, or politics. And right below that is go to the ad library. And that will redirect you to the specific page within the ad library, which shows all the ads that the page has ever run.
Oh, excuse me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you go back to can you start over? Because I was on the website. Can you restart this part again?
Yeah, for sure. So again, so this is the interface. This is the first page, the landing page of the Facebook ads library. And this shows information on all ads that have run on Facebook. Generally, we're most interested in issue, electoral, political ads, in terms of seeing whether there's kind of mis or disinformation there, although it's worth looking at the all ads part too, to see if there are ads that should have been categorized or should be categorized as issue, electoral, political, that aren't there. So Facebook generally does a decent job of categorizing this. They've been under pretty intense scrutiny for the last few years, as they should have been. So I think, only 1 or 2% of the ads right now, according to certain research, shows that, ads that are running in the all ads section or outside of issue, political, or electoral ads should be categorized as political ones. But anyway, so you can get there through that link, or you can get through the page transparency icon within a specific page on Facebook. And so once you click on that, it will reveal essentially all the ads that are running or have ever run from that specific page here. And you can also search using keywords, right? So here, for example, I was interested recently in protest ads that essentially started running on the back of the protest across the US recently. I wanted to see what kind of content or what kind of messaging people were using in their ads. And so you can search specific pages. You can search Trump's page, for example, or you can search with particular keywords. What's useful about searching for particular pages, it'll give you another icon where you can then search for specific keywords within ads by that page. So if you wanted to see what kind of messaging Trump is using around immigration, you'd find his Facebook page here. And then a search bar below would activate, and you could put in immigration, and it would pull up all the ads where Trump mentions immigration. And once you click on that, this is kind of what you, at first glance, this shows you. So it gives you kind of the messaging of the app or the ad, and then it shows you the spend and the potential reach of the ad. Here it's pending. Generally, it will show up with like different metrics of between 1,000, 10,000. What's kind of irksome about Facebook is that their buckets are quite kind of large. What I mean by buckets is that sometimes it'll say between 10,000 and 100,000 views, which isn't all that useful. And sometimes the potential reach is just greater than 1 million, which is incredibly not helpful, as that could mean 2 million, 3 million, it could be 1 billion. And unfortunately, there's no way of getting better data on that than what Facebook provides for us. And within that, if you click on see ad details, you get more information here. So for example, we can get information from the advertiser. So for this one, we were looking at Better Pennsylvania. And we actually get not only a phone number, but we get a website and we get an email address as well as a physical address. Sometimes these fields aren't as rich as what you're seeing here, but all ads have to provide some type of information about the advertiser. And again, when you're doing this type of like digital footprinting, and you're trying to get to the bottom of who's behind these ads, this is a really effective panel to use in terms of getting kind of websites and phone numbers and emails that you can then, if you need to, you reach out to them, or you can kind of like geolocate the address, or check out the website and fingerprint the website to see if it's legitimate or not. Just offers you a kind of wide array of angles to take when you're investigating this type of stuff. And then the ads within the ad library, it'll show you this, which is essentially how different demographics were targeted by the ad. Now, again, what's annoying about this is, yes, it shows men and women, and it shows you the state that the ads were run, but it doesn't say what particular demographic of men, aside from the ages, or what particular demographic of women, again, aside from the ages. And not only that, it's not that helpful in terms of showing us that it was targeting a state, as their state is made up of many, many different constituencies that have very diverse makeups in terms of general demographics. So while it's useful to some extent, unfortunately, we miss out on a lot of the more granular details, such as like, what district or what postcode were these ads kind of targeting. Now we also have the Facebook ad library report. And this is kind of like this shows you kind of the top searches, the spending totals, and ad numbers covering the past 2 years, essentially when Facebook implemented these tools, which was back in 2018. So the data goes as far back as they implemented these kind of transparency measures. And it also gives you a spending tracker, and it reveals kind of the highest daily spenders. You can also do that by week, by month, and by year as well within here. And again, within the report, which is separate from the ad library, it's only ads that have been labeled political, electoral, or issue specific. These are the only ads included in the report. So this does not include all ads, like business ads, or essentially it doesn't include any ads that haven't been categorized as political. But what is useful is it does kind of show all those pages, their spending, and it's a nice way of kind of quickly categorizing top spenders, et cetera. So if you're tracking kind of the US election, you can see kind of what candidates have been spending the most, and yeah, you can do a nice kind of like time analysis in terms of their spending. You can compare different candidates together, which is useful. And what's also useful, again, for anyone that uses Excel or Google Sheets, is that you can download all this data as a CSV file. And again, you can do that by day, you can do that by week, you can do that by month, or you can do that, you can essentially export the entire CSV file as well. So right now, well, first I'll explain this ad. So this is a pretty shocking ad that was just run recently on Facebook, right? And it's by a Georgia politician, and essentially says, looting hordes from Atlanta, looting hordes from Atlanta. That's what Liberty machines are for. And what he means by Liberty machines, he's talking about guns, right? And specifically here, like, semi-automatic or automatic rifles, which unfortunately are sold in the US. Now, this page or this ad ran, and likely ran for a few days before it was identified and taken down by Facebook. But my task for you guys is to, let's go back here. I want you guys to spend kind of 5 minutes now by navigating to this link and then seeing if you guys find anything else problematic like that, or anything that's like highly divisive, anything that might possibly violate Facebook's policies, whether it's misinformation, whether it's conspiratorial, or whether it's, content as kind of horrible as that last one, where essentially the politicians advocating using guns on protesters. So yeah, if you guys want to use 5 minutes to navigate to that link and then look for using protest or protest as the keyword to find kind of any problematic ads there. Let's do that. But beforehand, do we have any questions? Anyone have anything?
Rory, maybe it would be useful for you to show them live.
Yeah, I can do that for sure.
Because it's pretty cool, the resource, and seeing it work.
Sweet. Can you guys see my screen still?
Yep.
Awesome. So here we are. We'll click on issue electoral political, and then we can just do protests, because that will pick up protests as well. First of all, though, let me show you guys this. So let's look for Trump. And so this will serve as Trump's page. And again, here's the keyword kind of search bar that I was kind of referring to before. Here's the, if you wanted to look for stuff related to immigration, here you get these pretty awful ads in light of the attack from the invisible enemy, et cetera, et cetera. We can also see if there are any ads he's referring to. No protest related ads. Or you can just search for keywords like I showed you before. So we just search protest. You can try protest or protest, but I think protest will come up with anything that also mentions protests. So that's not helpful. We can kind of expand that to protests and see what that surfaces. Unfortunately, when you search for keywords, because you're searching for keywords, there's obviously no like keyword search there. But nonetheless, we can go in here and we can search on any number of these ads right now. So breaking, we were using the city of Los Angeles for imposing draconian curfews. This is by the ACLU. And we can click, again, we see these amounts, the total spending amount for the ad, the potential reach, again, is one of these unhelpful metrics, which is greater than 1 million people, which is laughable in terms of transparency, but nonetheless, it's that's what Facebook gives us. And then by clicking on this, we can see, again, a much more granular breakdown of this data. So again, when you see the impressions, this is the impressions so far. So the reason it doesn't accord to this is because it's an ongoing campaign. And so far it's reached 4,000 to 5,000 people. And again, you have these icons where you get kind of more information. And then you get, if you want more information advertiser, you have this one here, which gives us kind of all these nice details as well. But yeah, so for the next 5 minutes, if you guys just want to go and essentially kind of replicate the search I just did by looking at protests, or actually any keywords that you guys might be interested in investigating through kind of Facebook political ads, making sure you then click on the issue electoral political ads icon here, and then searching for the keyword. Let's spend kind of like 5 minutes seeing what kind of content we can find, or anything problematic that you guys might run into. So already I have this one here for anyone interested. This is the protests are organic. No one in America disagrees with protesting police abuses and brutality. The muscle of government control freaks, but the anarchists who mercilessly beat the innocent, torched the life work of people's businesses and destroyed cities, denouncing capitalism, were well organized across the nation. So I'm not sure if this necessarily violates Facebook's terms of services because they're kind of open, but nonetheless, this is definitely supporting a false narrative, or a narrative that doesn't have enough evidence to substantiate these claims necessarily. Oops. Any questions, you guys? Has anyone found anything fishy, suspicious, false narratives, misleading information, conspiratorial content?
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
Putting 2 words into the search is fine, right?
The search isn't great. You can play around with like more advanced of putting quotation marks around a phrase might serve as something. You can try that, or you can try it without it and see if there's a difference.
Okay, I'll play around. Thank you.
Unfortunately, Facebook hasn't. This is like they pat themselves on the back for this, as is like this is what they've done for transparency, but they've invested the bare minimum in terms of usability and just
got it. Okay, thank you.
I found an interesting one.
All right, let's hear about it.
Okay, let's see. Okay, can y'all see? Okay, so there's this right here.
Wait, I'm not sure we can actually see. Why don't I stop this and you share your screen right now? There we go.
I am sharing my screen. Can anyone see it though?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it. You can? Okay. Yeah, so there's this one.
Interesting.
Yeah, I haven't looked at, more than 1 million people, but not a lot has been spent on the ad. Let's see.
I mean, and this is why Facebook ads are arguably very dangerous, because it takes very little to get a lot of interactions or to get a lot of impressions. So when I was talking about building up groups, right? A lot of groups have pages where they run ads to get people, and then they redirect them back to the groups to build up a lot of people quickly. And then they'll pivot on the content, and they'll go from like dogs or kittens or rifles to hyper partisan content. But yeah, this is very interesting. It's not only like a grifting ad as it's trying to get people to buy this Deep State X book, but it's also kind of peddling different conspiracies. Interesting. Nice. Good find. Anyone else? If not, no worries. But did everyone kind of familiarize themselves with the platform and got used to it? Again, I'll take silence as a yes, a collective yes here. Cool. And again, this is one way of looking at Facebook ads. Let me share my screen again.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
The potential reach is not how many people it's currently reached. It's like how many people that ad can reach, like based on what?
Yeah,
so trying to understand those numbers a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a really good question. So potential reach is essentially how the potential number of people that will reach given the ad spend, right? And given the demographic that they're targeting. So generally, if it's like a wider space or kind of a wider demographic, you can reach a lot of eyeballs with very little spend. But if you're like really micro-targeting audiences, I think it costs a bit more through Facebook ads.
Okay, so the impressions are how many people have seen the ad currently? Exactly.
Okay. Again, a lot of these ads run for like weeks or months. So it might be like over 1 million in terms of potential reach, but the number might be only like 10,000 people. And that's because it hasn't kind of run the course or run its course necessarily.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You know how Facebook owns Instagram? So does it show us the ads that's on Instagram also?
Yeah, so let me see if I can find an example of that. So let me share my screen too again. So you guys can see again? Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, we can see it.
Cool. So if you see up here, these icons, what these icons show is that they ran on Facebook, on Instagram, on Messenger, and the audience, I forget the name of it, but the other audience kind of platform that Facebook runs.
Oh, okay.
So it'll show you, unfortunately, it doesn't break it down again by platform, right? So it'd be nice if they had metrics in terms of like potential reach and views for each one of the platforms. They don't, and for me, it's kind of another kind of like grave shortcoming of Facebook's, you know, essentially promise that they'd up their transparency measures. This is not being transparent at all. But nonetheless, it shows you kind of what platforms that these ads have been run on. But yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move forward?
Sorry, just one more.
Yeah, absolutely.
How long, what's the length of time that these ads run? Like, where can we see that information?
Yeah, that is actually a good question. Turns out that you can't see it on this. But this brings me to my next point that I was going to make. So the ad library, which you guys are looking at, is one way of accessing ads, right? The unfortunate part about it is that this is it. At any one time, all you can see is essentially 3 ads, right? So if you want to see the total spend or the total amount of ads that one particular page is running, this is a very time-consuming and ineffective way of like mapping and aggregating all this data. Not to mention that doesn't show the length of the campaign. So the only way of getting around this is through the Facebook Ads Library API, which is essentially a programmatic way of getting all this data in CSV format, and it'll show you the length of the campaign, the amount of days it'll run, total impressions, total spend, and it will give you data on what particular platform those ads ran. So it's the only way of getting this granular data. Unfortunately, again, and I will never cease to kind of disparage Facebook for its like transparency shortcomings. They make this next to impossible to access. We use it at First Draft because a researcher at Mozilla essentially built a very thorough script to pull down all this data. But yeah, to the long kind of answer to your question is that it doesn't provide that data, which is annoying. And if you really want to do kind of a very in-depth analysis of all the ads, especially all the ads run over time, and you want to do kind of visualizations on that, the only way of essentially being able to do that is through the API. Now, if you guys are interested, we will be running a webinar, hopefully in the next month, where we'll kind of show journalists and students how to use that, because the script is now open source. And so you should be able to do this yourselves. And it's really not, setting it up is a bit intense, but once it's done and once you guys familiar yourselves with it, it's really easy to scrape all the Facebook ads from the library and do kind of more kind of granular analysis on all of this stuff. If that does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So anything else before we kind of move forward? All these are amazing questions, by the way, like really, really, really good questions. Okay, if not, we'll jump back here. So for anyone looking for more resources, First Draft has no dearth of kind of resources for reporters. for especially regarding like monitoring, we have the news gathering monitoring and the social web essential guide, as well as the closed groups, messaging apps, and online ads essential guide as well. These are all free and they're all available on First Draft's website. And I highly recommend that you guys kind of use them as tools or at least references when doing this type of monitoring. You can, essentially just go on to First Draft's website and search for those, or just search Google for either one of these, and it'll surface, and you can then download them as PDFs that you can have on your computer. And I will say that beyond those, they're kind of there's a series of essential guides that go into not only monitoring but kind of investigative techniques as well as ethics, and just kind of tap into mis and disinformation more generally. But that is the end of this particular training. Thank you guys all for participating. And I just want to open up the floor again for any questions whatsoever, whether they have to do with monitoring the material I covered, or just kind of more general questions that you guys might have as kind of student journalists. Nothing. All right. Cool. Well, again, thank you guys very much for joining, and I will kind of pass this back over to Shay if you have any final comments.
No, I don't. Thank you so much, Rory, for hosting. Thank you all for joining again. I hope that these sessions have been useful to you. We have one more session tomorrow at the same time.